sure you've heard a lot of people talk about the fact that there's a vocations crisis. What they normally talk about is that there's really a lack of priests. And so if we can just ordain married men or ordain women, then the problem's solved. We can go back to doing what we're doing. But it's bigger than that. It actually is a vocations crisis, and this means every vocation, because it's not just the priesthood, it's also marriage. No one's getting married these days. You know, there are very few men, very few Catholic men who are very intentionally seeking the will of God and trying to pursue a vocation meaning a calling, a way that God has called you to go and give your life for the life of the world. Most people are just falling into their life. You know, the classic thing is you start dating a girl, you move in with her, maybe as a sign of your commitment, you have a few children, and then years down the track, you get around to getting married after she's been nagging you for a long time. Sadly, that's become the standard. Very rarely does a man really pursue intentionally the calling of God. And even then, very rarely does he see this as being something which is not about him, but about how God wants him to lay his life down for others. See, our whole understanding of vocation has been messed up. And I think fundamentally this is because there's a faith crisis. You know, we live in a world which says that the meaning of life is happiness, and therefore the most important person in the world is you. And that's not the gospel. The Christian gospel would say the meaning of life is the pursuit of love, the pursuit of God, and it's about me loving others. It's not so much about me trying to find the perfect soulmate, the person who's going to make me so completely fulfilled and I can live happily ever after. That's actually selfishness. And that's kind of closer to the church's definition of hell, because it's all about you. Whereas our understanding of heaven is where it's actually all about others. It's true joy because it's love, it's being poured out. And so this is where really at the core of this, there's a faith crisis. We don't know Jesus Christ. As much as we might come to church, we enjoy the music, we enjoy even doing ministry. How rare is it that you find someone who can genuinely say that they love Jesus, that they really just enjoy spending time in prayer? As much as we enjoy the trimmings of church, we enjoy the other stuff around it, very often the core, the central thing, which is that love relationship with Christ, that feels more like a chore. That feels like hard work. I think the other side of this is also that there is a crisis of manhood. We live in a world which does not really promote a strong sense of manhood anymore. We very much got this idea of staying as a boy, where you want to just live for yourself, live for your own pleasure. You know, if I can try and describe this, you know, we've got the boy, okay, let's use raspberry jam. It's all sweet, it's all pleasure, there is all sugar in that thing. That's very much the life of the boy. The boy wants to live purely for the next lollipop. You know, he's trying to live for the next little bit of joy that he can find. You look at a small 5-year-old child, he's got no comprehension of the needs of other people. His only desire is that he can be comfortable at every moment. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, if I can use this as an analogy, we've got the man, okay? Empty container of protein powder, that's all I could find. Symbolic of strength, you know, a man actually using his strength for others. Sadly, so often we've got a world filled with men spending a fortune on protein powder. But once again, it's self-centered. It's because I want to look buff so that people will love me and think that I'm a hero. Whereas the real Christian understanding of manhood is where your strength is poured out for others. It's a gift for the world, not for yourself. It's not about something to try and use as bait to try and get the next woman. But in between, you've got this halfway place, which is where most men find themselves. And that's what they call the man boy. Let's use a bit of mango chutney. The whole thing about mango chutney is it doesn't know what it is. Is it sweet or is it savory? It's halfway. And that's really the place of the man boy. This is where most men would find themselves, because they feel within themselves there is a sense where they want to do something great, but they simply haven't got the capacity to do it. You know, they read stories of the saints, or they read stories of people laying their lives down, and in their heads that sounds like an amazing idea, but they are still caught up in this idea of living for themselves, living for pleasure. And so what you end up with is the man who always tries to take the easiest path. You know, I'll serve God, but I'll do it in my way. Or I'll serve God, but on my time, and in the way that's going to be fun for me. And I think this is where, to try to understand vocation, you've got to understand the real crisis of manhood that's underneath this. Because you can't discern your vocation correctly when you're stuck in this middle place here. Because you don't know what voice you're listening to. Are you listening to the heroic call of the man who wants to lay his life down, or are you being influenced by the boy who wants to take it easy? And so I think this is where, as we begin this call into vocation, we need to step up in our manhood. We also need to step up in our faith. And I think when we start to come to this idea of consecrated life, once you've got that foundation in place, once you understand, okay, where am I coming from in my discernment, you can then start to understand what actually is this calling that God places before us. I've talked to so many men over the years who say priesthood or marriage. And the way that they describe that, once again, is always going to come down to whichever they think is easiest. I've met a lot of men who want to be priests because they think that women are difficult and marriage is hard and kids are complicated. And so living a life in a presbytery by yourself where you don't have to worry about finances or taxes, that seems like the easy option. And so priesthood becomes very attractive. I've met a lot of other men who think priesthood is hell because, you know, loneliness, no intimacy. And so straight away they think, I'm meant to be married. But I think that's a classic example of where, because you're stuck in that man-boy place in the middle, you're not really open to hearing the voice of God. So you've got to really deal with that first. Once you then come to consecrated life, to understand that this is all about love. The call of Jesus is all about love. It's about love of God and love of our neighbour. And so very little of this is actually about us. You know, the secret of this is that we have found our joy in giving ourselves for others. And I think that's one of the deciding moments when a boy becomes a man, when he starts to realise that the joy of life is not in having more toys, a bigger boat, bigger power tools, more video games. But the joy of life comes from having a sleepless night because you're trying to care for your child who's sick. Or it's being called up to the hospital at 2 a.m. to anoint someone who's had a heart attack. You know, it's when you lay your life down, that's when you discover true joy. And really, I think this is the invitation God is giving us. Christ is calling us into a place where we realize it's not about us at all. And so the two sides of this, I think firstly, there is the ministry side. And this is the bit that most people understand. A lot of people these days are engaged in youth ministry. They're doing youth work. They see the need and they realize that this is actually a very important thing. And so they get that side of it. But the danger is that you start to see the vocation very functionally. You know, you start to think, well, the priesthood is simply about doing the sacraments or celebrating Mass. Or it's simply about how can I evangelize the most number of people. And so once again, I've heard a lot of young guys say, you know, I feel a calling to the priesthood, but I reckon I could evangelize more people as a teacher, and that way I get to get married as well. So I'll go down that path. It's so functional. It misses the real beauty of what it is, which is that it's a relationship. It's intimacy. And this is where, once again, it comes back to that faith crisis. Have we actually met Jesus Christ? Do we actually encounter the beauty of knowing Christ's love in contemplation? Really, I think this is the gold. This is the the real treasure at the heart of any vocation. It's the fact that you're prepared to waste your life in loving somebody. Now, whether that's marriage or whether that is consecrated life or priesthood, it's about the fact that you're prepared to sacrifice everything just to love someone and to be loved by them. It's not about what you achieve. It's not about what you do. You can't look back at the end of your life with a beautiful resume of all the stuff that, the goals you've ticked off. In a sense, love is the most useless and most beautiful thing at the same time. It really is about just trying to enter into the mystery of the other person. And I think this is where we're trying to live a life which stretches our capacity for love. The whole thing of consecration is that Jesus calls us into a marriage relationship with him, but then he calls us to go deeper and deeper into that mystery. It's very much like trying to pursue a treasure. And this is the language that many of the saints used. Even in the scriptures, it talks about this in terms of pursuing wisdom, pursuing the heart of God. There's a beautiful passage in the book of Job in chapter 28 where it talks about pursuing wisdom, and it uses the image of someone heading off into the wilderness, into the mountains, trying to find gold and digging into the heart of the mountains, basically digging up the roots of the mountains it refers to, swaying alone from a cable in these trenches, trying to find the tiniest glimmer of gold by candlelight, glimmering out of the rock. And it uses that image of someone who is so captivated by the treasure that they would be prepared to leave the rest of the world behind and go into that solitude to try and find it. Now, I remember when I first joined the MGLs in my pre-novitiate, one morning I stumbled across that passage, and it spoke very clearly to me because of my family history. My great-grandfather was a gold prospector. He left Ireland at the age of about 14 and travelled the world looking for gold. He went through Canada, he went through South Africa, he ended up going to North Queensland and Cairns, couldn't find anything, and then eventually heard that there was gold in Western Australia, and so he walked from Cairns to the top of WA near Marble Bar, and then eventually walked all the way down to Kalgoorlie, or what we now know as Kalgoorlie, and there, in the middle of the desert, he found gold. That story always astounded me, that someone would be prepared to risk their life, to sacrifice everything, to leave their family behind, just to look for a nice coloured rock. And yet we have this treasure of Christ being given to us, and so many of us are just too lazy to even bother. We leave it buried under the ground because we know it's there. We just take it for granted. We expect that we're going to receive it. And so I think, once again, in trying to understand consecrated life, you've got to understand a little bit about heaven. Because sadly, a lot of us come from a very Protestant understanding of heaven. We think of heaven as just being this place, this paradise, and as long as I'm saved, I've got my ticket to get through the pearly gates, and that's the end of the story. So really, I don't need to do anything except the bare minimum to get that ticket. If I've got the ticket to heaven, I'm in. Catholic understanding is so much more beautiful, because the Catholic understanding is that heaven's not a place, heaven's a relationship. Heaven is being immersed in this ocean of infinite love, which is God. And so it is guaranteed. It's given to me by virtue of my baptism, by virtue of the death and resurrection of Christ. But my life here on earth prepares me to receive that. So everything I do here, the way that I live my vocation is going to shape my eternity, because I'm basically stretching my capacity to receive that love. Saint Therese of Lisieux used this. She wrestled with this image a lot. She was trying to understand, well, how is it that some parts of the scriptures say that everyone gets to heaven and everyone's equal, but other parts of the scriptures say that there's like a hierarchy. Some people get more than others. And she couldn't work this out. And so one of her sisters explained it using an image where she said, imagine that God is like an ocean. God is like this water of love. And everyone comes into heaven with a particular vessel. And everyone comes in with a vessel of a particular size. And so some people come in with something the size of a thimble. So small you can barely see it. But their thimble, like that's their heart. Okay, that's their capacity to receive love. And so they come into heaven and God fills that completely. And there you are. That's your heart. That's the way you receive eternity. But then she says, well, some other people come in with like a cup. Okay, they've lived a life where they've poured themselves out. They've stretched their desire. They've stretched their capacity to love others. And so their heart is bigger. And so they are also filled, but they're filled obviously with more. But then you find some others who have really intentionally given themselves, poured their lives out, because they understand that they just want God. They're never satisfied with just enough. They just want more and more of Him. And so through that process of prayer and ministry and service, they have stretched their capacity, and so they come in with a bucket. Okay, and so you look at someone like Mother Teresa, who's just, every day was not about her. Every day was, how do I stretch myself in love for other people? How do I stretch myself in love for God? And so that's her. She has just gone into heaven with a massive bucket. St. Augustine talks about this same thing, where he talks about how the whole journey of prayer is about stretching ourselves in desire. And he uses the image of, if you've got like a sack, I haven't got a sack, but I've got an old t-shirt with a knot in the bottom. Okay? You've got a sack and that's it, that's its capacity right there, okay? But you want to hold more. And so what do you got to do? You got to stretch it. Okay, you've got to grab that material and you've got to pull it as hard as you can and stretch it to the point where it almost feels like it's breaking. But gradually, the mouth of this sack just gets wider and wider until it can hold more. Now, I always love that image because, once again, I think it speaks so much to the heart of vocation, and it speaks so much to the heart of consecration particularly. Your vocation is love. Your vocation is to stretch your heart as wide as it possibly can so that it can receive God. And so the call of Christ is to take up a lifestyle which is going to prepare you for eternity. Now, I think this is what starts to make sense of consecrated life to us, because on the surface, consecrated life is stupid. Let's just put it pretty bluntly. If you had your child come to you and say, Daddy, I want to go and spend the rest of my life having no money and having other people tell me what to do, and I don't want to get married, I want to live by myself and be alone all the rest of my life. If a child came up to you and expressed that desire, you'd probably find a good psychologist for them. On the surface, we seem to be depriving ourselves of all the most beautiful things of life. But when you understand what heaven is, and when you start to understand what the purpose of life is, it really starts to make sense. Because if heaven is Jesus, if heaven is entering into a relationship, then I want to prepare my heart to be in that place. I don't want anything else filling that vessel. I don't want this cup filled with any other junk. I want everything poured out. I want everything cleansed out. So all there is space for Christ alone. So I can receive that infinite love that He poured out upon us on the cross. And so when you start to look at the tradition of consecrated life, it's been a life lived in desire. I remember reading a book years ago about the Trappist monks, and it very simply said they lived in the land of desire. That was the way it described their whole lifestyle. Because it was a life of hungering. It was a life of yearning. That 7 times a day the monks would go to the chapel and pray the Psalms, and it was in this holy longing for the one that they loved. And every day they would live almost like a life of like a perpetual Lent, particularly in the Benedictine tradition. Never eating enough to be fully satisfied, but just having enough for their own strength. But always leaving just this little bit of hunger. because they wanted to remind themselves, I'm hungering for Christ. I'm hungering for the one who is the bridegroom who wants to love me so much. And so really every part of their life was about stretching themselves. When you start to get to the later traditions of religious life, the people like St. Francis, St. Dominic, the mendicant movement, it became much more missionary. And so they still lived that hungering life of prayer and self-denial, but it was then also added to a life of mission where they were hungering for the salvation of souls and trying to connect with that yearning of the heart of Christ. How do we start to feel the same pain that Christ felt upon the cross, crying out for the salvation of others? And so even in our modern day, as religious life continues on, at the core of it is this fact that we are not complete without Christ. And so every day we are preparing ourselves for eternity. We're preparing ourselves to be able to receive that treasure. But at the same time, we're finding the treasure. Go back to that image in the book of Job of the person who's digging into the mountain looking for gold. Our job in prayer is to dig down and find the gold that no one else has ever found, and then bring it up to the surface and bring it out in our preaching, in our teaching, in our ministry. And so through that, we bring life to the world. There is something like a beautiful madness about consecrated life. See, even when we look at the priesthood, as I said before, very often people look at it in a very functional way. How can I go to the place of the greatest need? How can I do the most? And they look at consecrated life and think, well, there's something really doesn't make a lot of sense about this. That you're just wasting your time praying. You're just wasting your time hidden away, hiding. But it's not the case at all. You look at the greatest spiritual masters of our church all came from religious orders because they were the ones who were digging into that mountain and bringing out the gold. There is a very, very powerful mission that is being given to consecrated men and women, that we would be able to just love Christ and be with Christ and reveal Christ to the world, discovering a love that very few people have actually ever encountered. So I think very simply, as you are going through this Vocations weekend and as you're discerning your calling, look at those key questions. Faith crisis. Where do you actually stand with God? Have you actually encountered God to the point where you say you're madly in love? The crisis of manhood. Have you reached the point where you have really stood firm and actually want to pour your life out for the rest of the world? Or are you still caught up in this lie that life is simply for happiness, for my happiness? But then to start to enter into this mystery of what Christ calls us to, where he says, enter into my life, come into an intimacy with me. Even where he says, take up your cross and follow me. That's like the ultimate intimacy, because it's saying, follow me even when it's not fun. Follow me even when there's no benefit. But come and discover my heart, and discover the secret hidden gold that very few people will ever encounter. Consecrated life is pretty much one of the most beautiful things God's ever given to us. And I think it's sad that so few people really discover it these days. The church needs this, the world needs this. And I think very much the reason why there is a faith crisis in the world is because there are so few who are leading the way. There are so few these days who are prepared to become gold prospectors, to seek out the wisdom of God and reveal that hidden truth to the world. And once again, to make God real, to wake the world up.